Have you ever tried designing in Photoshop and you wanted to be creative but couldn't? In this class, I'm going to unlock your creativity. How? By showing you how to use layer masks. Let's get started. In this class, we're going to look at how to use layer masks in Photoshop. Now, layer masks is very useful. I can't remember using Photoshop for a design project without using layer masks. I always use layer masks. So that is how frequent you will need layer masks, especially when you want to be creative. Now, let's define layer masks. What is layer masks? Layer masks is a reversible way to hide part of a layer. This gives you more editing flexibility than permanently erasing or deleting parts of a layer. The most important tool in Photoshop for creatives is layer masks. That is, to me, that's the most for creatives. It gives you so much control. So I would like you to pay attention in this lecture, because what I'm about to show you will give you so much creative control and creative freedom. Now, a wise man once said that nothing worth doing in life should be done without layer masks, which is kind of funny, but in the world of Photoshop, it's true. Nothing worth doing in life, so here in life is in design, should be done without layer masks. So let's look at some uses of layer masks in design. You are doing a design for a client or for your own personal projects. Let's look at some uses. One is hiding part of an image. So you use layer masks to hide part of an image. So let's look at this image. For example, this image, you have a cat and Christmas ball like that. We can use layer masks to hide the ball here. We can use layer masks to hide it. How? By just hiding that. So you can see this first in this how. So we can use layer masks for hiding part of an image. So this is an image. We use layer masks to hide this part of that image. Second use of layer masks is we can also use layer masks to blend or fade backgrounds. How? Look at this image. Let's say a client gave you a project to design a header for websites or Facebook page, and this image looks more like square. It's rectangular, but for Facebook or for web, you need more room. Once you create a layer and you bring the image in, this is how the image looks like. You can see there's a vertical space, and if you want your design to look seamless, to communicate without any distraction, currently the lines there is creating rectangles. So there's one rectangle over here, there's another rectangle here, another rectangle here. So that is how the eye sees a composition. He sees one small rectangle here, one big rectangle, and another small rectangle. How do we fix it? We use layer masks to fix it by blending the image with layer masks. So you see the before and the after. The after looks more seamless. It helps with the communication. If you want to put text on it, you put text on it without showing the lines. And these lines create rectangles. So to avoid these rectangles in your designs, you have to know how to use layer masks to do it, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. Let's look at this second example. This image here is also looks like square, although it's a rectangle, but we need more room. So let's say we create, currently you don't see it because the background is gray, but there's actually a rectangle behind the image. So to fix that, what I did was I just blended it in Photoshop using layer masks. The third use of layer masks is photo manipulation. Now, this involves transforming or altering a photograph using various methods and techniques to achieve a desired result. Now, what do I mean? So look at this image I picked online just to show you. This could only be achieved using layer masks in Photoshop. This also could be achieved using layer masks in Photoshop. Look at this, it looks very detailed. The concept is very strong. With layer masks, you can do something like this. So this is how important layer masks is in Photoshop. So I'd like you to pay attention and use the exercise files to practice in this class. Let's look at this last example. This could also be achieved using layer masks. Now, how do we add layer masks in Photoshop? Let's look at how to add layer masks in Photoshop. Now, I assume that you already have Photoshop installed, and the version of Photoshop I am using is 2018. If you are using Photoshop CC 2020, 2019, if you're using Photoshop CS6, CS5, and you see that your workspace looks a bit different, what I recommend you do is you watch our basics lecture on how to customize your Photoshop interface and how to use Photoshop for these specific software. I've made videos for 2020, I've made videos for CS6, CS5, so any software changes shouldn't affect you. Now let's dive in. To add layer masks in Photoshop, I'll go to the project first. I'll just bring this image in to Photoshop. And to use layer masks, how do you add a layer mask? In Photoshop, you can see this icon here. If you hover your mouse over it, you'll see that add a layer mask. So we add a layer mask. So this is a white mask. There are two kinds of masks. There's a white mask and a black. The one thing I want you to remember is white reveals, black conceals. What do I mean? Now, white in the world of Photoshop in layer masks, it does nothing to the image that you are putting the layer mask on. But to put a black layer mask on this very image, you hold the Alt key and you click on the layer mask icon, and that puts a black mask on it. So that is how to add layer masks in Photoshop. So to add a layer mask, all you have to do is just click here. If you want a white mask, you just click. If you want a black mask, you hold the Alt key and you click. Then it hides everything. There is also more to this. How? Going back into our lecture, I want to help you understand how layer masks work. To help you understand, there are some tools in Photoshop that will be very vital. They work hand in hand with the layer masks. One is the paint bucket tool. So back in Photoshop, say this is the tools panel, you locate the paint bucket tool, you press the G key, that will, and when you right click, you select the paint bucket tool. Now with the paint bucket tool selected, if we add a layer mask and we have white as our foreground color and we click, nothing happens. Why? Because white reveals. But if we switch to black and we click, it hides. So that is how to use the paint bucket tool to add layer mask. You can also use the paint bucket tool to add a gray layer mask. Say if we 50% gray, if we use the color picker and we paint with gray, you can see that the image is partially hidden. So that is how to use the paint bucket tool. And always make sure that you have the layer mask selected, not the image. To make sure that the layer mask is selected, you will see there's a white bounding box around that box. So always make sure you have this box selected. And once you select the paint bucket tool, I want you to be aware of the tools options bar. Make sure that the blend mode is set to normal, the opacity is set to 100%. These can be customized, but for now, make sure that the settings are the same. Next, let's look at the gradient tool. How do we use the gradient tool to add layer masks? So back into Photoshop, I'm going to undo this with Ctrl-Alt-Z. So with a gradient tool, to select the gradient tool, you press the J key again and you right click and choose the gradient tool. Now with the gradient tool active, make sure that, for example, if I want to hide this part of this image, what I do is I press D key to reset my foreground and background color. And if you have white as your foreground color, you switch with the X key. So X to switch to black. Now in the tools options bar, make sure there are different ways to do it, but I always recommend you choose from black to transparent. So the second one is black to transparent. Let's set this to linear, the color mode normal, opacity 100%. Everything here should be the same. Then you add a layer mask. So now once you have a layer mask added, if you click from here to here, this is what happens. It hides the image from that point to this part. Now you can also hide from here to here. So however you draw it, that's how it works. So I want you to play around with it and see if you get a different result. It's all about play. That's how to get good at layer masks. The next tool you have to understand is the brush brush tool. In Photoshop, you press the B key to activate the brush tool. And once you have in the tools options bar, you set the opacity of the brush. Now we want a softer brush, so press the brush to 0. The size can be controlled here, but the shortcut key to control the brush with the right bracket key to increase the brush size and the left bracket key to decrease the brush size. You can also control the opacity of the brush by increasing to, let's say, 70. I'm going to leave my 74, the flow of the brush. Now I'm going to leave it as it is now. Just play with it. I will just delete the layer mask by right clicking and delete. And once I add the layer mask and I have, say, black as my foreground color, I can just paint to hide this part of the image. So that is how to use the brush tool to also add layer masks or to hide part of an image using layer masks. Next, we will look at examples. Now I'm going to show you how I remove this image with this example. In the project files, open this image. In the project files, open it. So I have added this image. So right click and choose open with Photoshop. Now once you have this image in Photoshop, add a layer mask by clicking here, this icon, to add the layer mask. And to hide this, we're going to use a brush. So B key for brush. Make sure that you have a soft round brush by going to here and setting to softness to 0. Make sure the mode is set to normal. Opacity, you want it around 70, 75, 80%. Then to lower the brush size, you can just use the left bracket key to lower the brush size. Now our goal here is to remove this image here, to remove this object here. But before we do that, let's duplicate this layer with Control J, making sure the layer is selected. Just Control J to duplicate it, and with the down layer, right click and delete this. Now what we want to do is use the move tool and push this down. Turn off the top layer. Our goal here is that we want this layer to be here, so that once we turn this on, then we click on the mask and we use the B key to activate the brush tool. Once we paint with black, it's going to hide this, but whilst it's hiding this, the magic is being replaced with a background layer of the beneath layer. This, now we have a layer beneath it. So that is the whole reasoning behind it. Now I'm making a very big mistake. Why? I'm painting on the down layer. So make sure you are painting on the right layer. Make sure you have the layer mask active before you start using the brush tool. Other than that, it's not going to work for you. So I'm going to paint black on this with 74% opacity just to hide this. So to review this part of this image, what I'll do is press the F key to switch to white in the foreground and just review this. You can also lower the opacity with the left bracket key and just lower the opacity of this. That is how I use layer masks to remove the object from this image. The next example is this very image. I'm going to show you how I use layer masks to fix this image. So back into the project file, I want you to open this image, right click and choose open with Photoshop CC. Now there are a lot of things happening here. Normally if you have an image like this, maybe the client will say he wants a slide for a website, which the size, he wants the size to be, the width to be 920 and the height to be, let's say, 900. And I'm just doing this as an example. You can do the same, and I'll bring this into the working document. I'll bring it into the working document like this, right click and choose convert to smart object, and I'm going to reduce the size of this. If any of these is new to you, I would like you to check my basics to Photoshop. Anytime you're working with an image like this, one thing you don't want to do is you don't want the image to, you don't want to hide some part of the image by resizing it to fit. If you don't want to miss some part of the image. So to show all the part of the image, but at the same time we don't want the edges to show. We don't want the edges to show. How do we do that? We add a layer mask. So add a layer mask to the layer by clicking here to add a layer mask. Then you use the gradient tool. Remember the gradient tool, J for gradient. Use the gradient tool to J for gradient, select the gradient tool. Then make sure you have black to white as a foreground color. You have black to transparent selected linear gradient. Then you start from here. You hold the shift key to make sure you constrain to the 90% degree angle. Then you draw from here to here just to hide this part of the image, and you draw from here to here just to hide this part of the image too. So with this, I've been able to blend the image with the background. That's seamless. So with this, if I zoom in, Control Plus, and let's say I want to fix this part, this part is very important. I want to show this part. All I do is use the brush key. So use the brush key B for brush, then use the left bracket key to reduce the brush size, and make sure you have white as a foreground color, because you want to reveal this part of the image. So just bring back this part of the image. So that is also how to work with a scenario like this. Let's look at this example. Go to the project file and open this in Photoshop. Right click and just open this in Photoshop. Now I want you to do the same thing we did the last one. In this case, I'm just going to use the crop tool by pressing the C key. Use the crop tool to just increase. By holding the Alt key, I can increase on both directions and add a background layer. So hold the Control key and click on create a layer. Use the paint bucket tool, switch to X, add a background layer. Now the same thing we did there, we are going to add a layer mask to the top layer. Add a layer mask and right click and choose gradient tool. Make sure you have black as your foreground color, black to transparent selected, then you drag from here to here. So the same thing we did there, drag from here to here. Play with it and you can feel the difference yourself. I'll select the layer mask and use the brush key, increase the brush size with the right bracket key, and just switch to white. So white reveals. I'm just using this to bring back this part of the image, the chair here. So basically that is how the basics, that's how layer mask works. I want you to download the exercise files, practice this. I think that is the end of our class on how to use layer mask.